was perfect to get it rolling and learn how to do a podcast, learn how to be a host. By the way, you're doing a fabulous job.
I will leave that in. I'm not going to edit that out. Welcome to How Brands Are Built, where branding professionals get into the details of what they do and how they do it. I'm your host, Rob Meyerson. Thanks for listening. Today's episode is brought to you by Squad Help, the world's #1 naming platform. And today's guest is Armin Vit. Even if you don't recognize Armin's name, I'm guessing you know his blog, Brand New. Brand New is one of, if not the site, for reviews of corporate and brand identity work. Armin has reviewed every major rebrand or brand launch in recent history, and his reviews receive hundreds of comments and hundreds of thousands of views every week. Born and raised in Mexico City, Armin, along with his wife and partner, Bryony Gomez-Palacio, runs the graphic design firm UnderConsideration, based in Bloomington, Indiana. Together, Armin and Bryony have also created other design blogs, co-authored books, and organized events like the annual Brand New Conference. I was excited to talk to Armin about design trends, blogging, and the pros and cons of being a professional critic. The conversation starts with some ancient history, going back to a blog called Speak Up and FutureBrand's 2003 redesign of Paul Rand's UPS logo, which gave rise to Brand New. I had a great time talking to Armin, and I can't wait for you to hear it. Let's get started. Armin Vit, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Rob.
So prior to Brand New, which I think it's fair to say is now the leading corporate and brand identity design blog, you ran a blog called Speak Up starting in about 2003. And I've heard you refer to that as basically the first design blog out there. So what prompted you to create Speak Up? And if you could give us kind of the fast version of the story, what got you from Speak Up in 2003 to Brand New today?
So the story starts when I first joined a blog called Typography, and that was the first sort of design blog that I ever encountered. And I became an author on that side after having been a commenter and sort of enjoying the back and forth of someone posting something and then having the ability to comment along with a community of others. And then as I became an author, so then I became familiar with the movable type platform, which back then, movable type was the default choice for a blogging platform.
Okay.
And I had dabbled in doing websites here and there prior to that, but seeing how the templating worked and how easy it was to set it up, I thought like, hey, I could do this, but for graphic designers. Typographya was very specific to type designers and typographers. So I figured, this could be helpful for the graphic design industry. So I set it up. And one important thing to know is that prior to launching Speak Up, nobody had any idea who I was. And there was no reason for anyone to know who Armin Vit was.
Sure. I guess some people start blogs because they're famous, sort of, and so they have an instant following, but this was the opposite.
Yeah, and I promise that that's the first and last time I'll refer to myself in the third person. But so I started it, and I started emailing people who I wanted them to read what I was writing. So whether it was Steve Heller, Michael Beirut, other designers that that I enjoyed their work at the time, I wanted them to know about it. And at first, there was not a lot of traction, but little by little, just emailing one person at a time, saying like, hey, here's a blog that I started, come check it out. That started to gather some traction. We started to get some additional authors that thought, hey, this is fun, I can do it too. So this was 2003. By 2004-05, it has sort of cemented itself as the best blog to talk about graphic design.
Wow, that's pretty quick. And like you said, it's not that you knew these designers that you admired and you were emailing. It's just that they were sort of famous or at least well known within the design community. And so you took what sounds like a pretty bold move of saying, hey, you've never heard of me, but I wanted to share something I wrote.
Exactly. I think people just enjoyed the openness of it. What I tried to do was provide an alternative to magazines and books. And what at the time, there was a lot of essays about graphic design. Nowadays, no one writes essays about graphic design. But back then, it was almost a sport where a lot of people did it. And myself and the other authors really enjoyed that, doing it without the constraints of an editor, because even though I was the editor, I didn't have the experience to say like, no, you can't say this or expand on that. I was just like, hey, I'm riled up by what you wrote, let's post it.
Yeah.
And I think that attitude and that lack of experience in a way, and also like that overconfidence that you have as a young person, where like, oh, I'm right. No matter what I'm saying, I'm right. I think that really attracted a lot of people. So the next 2-3 years just became really fun. People started to know who I was, and that wasn't important. Like, I didn't want to be known. It was just interesting that from there, from Speak Up, I started to become friendly or acquainted with the designers that I respected. I got my first speaking gig in a panel. And, so from there, that just gave me more confidence that I didn't need at the time, I think, because I already had too much and not necessarily earned at the time.
Well, it also, it sounded like from something I read or an interview you did that it indirectly led to you actually getting a job at Pentagram under Michael Bierut. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that is very true. So Michael started commenting on Speak Up, and then he and Bill Drentel and Rick Poynter and Jessica Helfand launched Design Observer, which was a really great blog run by powerhouse writers and thinkers. So we always had exchanges sort of by email in the back end about, hey, did you read this? What do you think of that? And when the time was right, I had already moved to New York. Speak Up started when I was in Chicago. When I moved to New York, two of his senior designers left at the same time for, in good terms and everything. So he emailed me and said, like, I like the way that you think about graphic design. You seem to be a decent graphic designer. Would you like to come work for me? And basically, I think he brought me in for an interview to see my portfolio just as, because I guess it was something that he had to do. But yeah, I think he was sold on me working there just based on my writing on Speak Up, which is kind of weird and fun and interesting.
No, it's interesting. I mean, it says a lot about him, I suppose, that he appreciated how you think about design, and that maybe that was almost more important or as important as looking at your actual work. I suppose he saw your work through the interview process, but at the time that he asked you to come for the interview, he probably hadn't seen much of it. He just knew how you thought about, how you critiqued other design, that you were fluent in the language of design. And I suppose through those emails and through the posts that you had written, had a pretty good feel for who you were as a designer.
Yep, that is absolutely correct, and very flattering too.
Well, I guess the one piece in there that I didn't get that I'm just curious about is, why is it not Speak Up still now in 2020? Did Speak Up evolve into Brand New, or did you for some reason have to drop Speak Up and then start Brand New separately?
Yeah, so Brand New started in 2006, and we called it a spin-off of Speak Up because that's what it was. What happened was that in 2004, I think, that's when the UPS Paul Rand logo was redesigned by FutureBrand.
FutureBrand, yeah.
And it was a big deal, and it was the first time that designers could go somewhere other than a bar and vent about the logo, and that somewhere happened to be Speak Up. So that was one of our key posts in the history of UnderConsideration. And so after that, we started posting a few other large redesigns here and there, and a lot of the comments on those posts were like, oh, I hate it. Oh, I love it. The comments were not extremely thoughtful or like mini essays, which is what people expected on Speak Up. So a lot of people were like, oh, these discussions about logos don't belong on Speak Up. They're not.
They weren't as meaty.
Yeah, exactly. So they weren't as it's like they didn't have the same gravitas as the other posts. So we're like, okay, fine. I'll start another blog just for this, and we'll see what happens.
Got it. And then Speak Up eventually, it doesn't exist anymore, I assume, right?
Yeah, so 2009, and it coincided with the rise of Twitter and Facebook, especially Twitter, where all of a sudden now everyone had a platform to share their comments. So it happened very gradual where people, instead of leaving comments on Speak Up, they would reference the post on their Twitter comment and then make the comment on Twitter. So all of a sudden, those discussions started to be moved on Twitter, but there wasn't that back and forth. It was just like people had a platform that they could use with their name attached to it, so they just started posting there. And then I think the attention span of reading, as I mentioned, like a lot of the comments were mini essays, like 500-word comments, things like that. So all of a sudden, people are starting to get used to 140 characters, and the patience for reading a thread of comments on Speak Up was just not there.
Well, I want to talk a lot about how you do what you do now with the, and I know you're a designer as well, but for a second, let's focus on the critique of design. So obviously at this point, given the popularity of Brand New, you're receiving tips and you're seeing just tons of work every day. You can't review all of it. How do you decide? Is there a process, or is it more just your opinion on how to decide what to review and what to ignore?
I think it goes back to the UPS post and seeing how something so big, something so well known attracted so many comments because so many people knew what UPS was. So that gave everyone sort of a little bit of an insider knowledge of how to have an opinion about the logo. So one of the main things that I've always maintained is that whatever client we're reviewing, or product or service or company, it has to be somewhat sizable. They can't all be UPS, they can't all be Walmart or Starbucks, but it can't be just like a local hardware store that redesigned or a local restaurant. It has to be something that as many people as possible can find something that they relate to.
Right.
And it's also, especially when it's a bad logo, it's much more enjoyable to see a train wreck from a large company, product or service than, that's something small. So a little bit is either understanding or acknowledging what makes good online content, what people will, take time off to read and react to. And that has been by far, by most standards, that has to be things that people recognize. So I sort of have a little grid, I guess, in my mind of if it's big and juicy, it doesn't matter if it's great design or bad design, I'm going to put it up. If it's sort of like fine design, and there's a lot of really fine design that comes my way that looks good, that makes sense, that is appropriate for the client, but the client is small or regional, that is the least popular kind of content because it doesn't incite many reactions.
Yeah, ironically, it's there's less to say about it than if it was horrible, right?
Yeah, exactly. And if it's a tiny client, the work has to be amazing. Like it has to be unique. It has to be experimental in some way. It has to just blow people's minds. So there's a few things here and there. And I think over the years, I sort of know which posts are going to do well. And sometimes I'll put things that I know are only going to get, 10, 15 comments, but it's worth pointing out, whether because it's from a well-known design firm or whether it's, it does fit on that sort of fine range and not that big client. But, it's still part of reporting the news of what's happening in the identity design world.
Right. And when you sit down to review a piece of work, do you have any kind of process that you go through? And now that you've written so many reviews and critiques over the years, I'm just curious, what have you learned about how design work, and especially brand identity design, should be critiqued?
Yeah, I've made a formula for myself a little bit where I introduce who the client is just for my sake and for the reader's sake, just so that we're like clear on what we're talking about. Then I'll just talk about the logo, which is the starting point. That's how most identity projects start, with a logo. So that's what I talk about first. So that gives me a lot of ins to talk about, how I interpret what I just explained about the client. How does that reflect on the logo? And from there, I talk about the colors, the typography. So those are the ingredients that make up the identity. Then I talk about how those ingredients are put together in the applications. And then I just give a quick statement, wrap-up statement of, overall, yay, nay, and a little bit of why. And I just I always try to give a summary that attempts to encapsulate why it's good for this client or why this solution applies well at this point in time. And it's rarely just like, oh, overall it sucks and good luck.
Well, it's interesting because I noticed that you really have to blend, like you said, you're partly reporting the news. You're partly just saying this is new and I want to make sure everyone has seen it. And you're sort of explaining what it is. You're also dissecting it as a designer. You can, with your own experience, you can talk about this is the typeface they're using, or maybe even sort of this is why they made this choice versus that choice. And then there's that last layer of kind of opinion, of just sort of good or bad opinion, like they made this choice and they should have made this other choice or something like that. And you're really blending all three of those. Is that fair to say? And I don't know if you think about it that way at all.
Yeah, no, that's exactly that is kind of like the lasagna of my post, because you have to blend. If you don't have an opinion, if you're just if you're just describing something, it becomes boring. The moment that I add my opinion, and I've always been extremely clear about this is my opinion. It's based on my biases. It's based on my understanding. It's based on my likes and dislikes. And I think people appreciate that. They're like, there's someone behind it. It's not just a machine spitting out a description of what you're looking at. So yeah, it's a little bit of trying to, blend that experience that I have as a designer. I had the opportunity to work with Michael Bryony at Pentagram, so I know how large clients work. I've seen that. I used to work at a really tiny design firm in Chicago, so I know how small design clients work. And, on our own, we've worked with medium-sized clients. So all of that helps me make informed opinions, and I can relate. And sometimes it's funny because sometimes I'll say something in the review like, oh, I bet the client didn't want to do this or that, even though that was never mentioned in a press release or anything. And then the designer by email will tell me how did you know that that's what happened? That's how this, so I sort of know how these things go. And it's not because I'm that smart or anything. It's just sort of experience and really enjoying what I do and hearing stories from other designers. I love going to conferences and hearing how designers worked on a project, and all of those things sort of inform. So then they allow me to make an informed opinion that hopefully is also entertaining at the same time. Because you can have an opinion and make it boring as hell. So at the same time, I also have to keep it lively enough to keep people interested and coming day in and day out to see what's happening, and what will Armin say this time. That's the last time I'll refer to myself in this way.
I have a feeling you're going to say that again. Yeah. So I'm curious though, something that all critics face and that criticism in general has always faced is this sort of feedback loop issue. So as you and as Brand New become more influential, you obviously must be aware that if you're writing a great review about work that was done by some unknown designer, that's probably great for that designer. It could be a huge boost to their career, get them a lot of exposure. At the same time, if you write a really negative review, it could upset a client. It could maybe even have financial consequences for some big consultancy if that client gets so upset that they take their business elsewhere. So, I mean, do you I don't mean to stress you out, but do you ever worry about that, about having too much influence? Do you just feel like that comes with the territory and who cares? You have the right to say whatever you think. How do you think about it?
I worry a lot about it. And what's interesting is that I think going back to Speak Up, where no one knew who I was, where like my opinions, they didn't really matter. Like it didn't matter what some young designer from Mexico that no one has heard of had to say about the UPS logo. But then that sort of evolved into what you just mentioned, a blog with a good reputation that both designers and clients alike read and respect, which is absolutely flattering, and it's amazing, and it blows my parents' minds away because I was a terrible high school student that was not there was no indication that I was going to amount to anything in my life based on my high school grades, how I behaved, anything. So it's pretty insane to me to think that what I have to say can have that influence. And I know it has, and my ego doesn't, I have a little bit of an ego, but it's not driven by that. I think it's, the opposite applies in that it does really make me think hard about what I say, especially now that, with how big it's gotten, anything not mean, because I never say anything mean. Any negative criticism that I make can have a negative effect on someone's business. And I'm not going to specify who or what or for whom, but I've had emails with that after a review, they did have a negative effect on something. And, after that, I've been really cautious about what I say and how I say it, but that happens less often than whenever I'll write about a designer's work that no one has seen, and then they start to get popular. Like that makes everything worthwhile. Like all the trouble, all the hard work that goes into it, being able to elevate someone's work, not because it's someone that I admired prior to writing about it.
It's not someone you know necessarily.
Yeah, but just someone whose work all of a sudden is like, wow, this is amazing. As many people as possible should know about this. Yeah. And so I think that's when that popularity is really beneficial. And I think it also translates into the brand new conference that we've been running for 10 years where we have people like Michael Berut and Paula Scher and, people from Wolf Collins, but at the same time, we've had designers that no one has heard about, and they become popular, and then they become regular speakers after speaking at the brand new conference. So that
must feel good.
Yeah, it is nice. And it's not to pat myself on the back, or me and my partner, Bryony and wife, we were the ones that select the speakers. Like, we don't do it to get credit for it. We just do it because it's such a nice thing to be able to do for someone else. And I guess it goes back to the fact that someone gave us a chance being unknowns at some point. So it's a nice way of paying it forward.
Yeah. The other part of the feedback loop that I'm sure you're aware of is, designers are probably some, I don't want to overstate the case, but some designers may be sort of thinking about what is Armin going to write, or just what are the comments going to be on the brand new blog when this goes live. Whereas I think we'd both agree they probably should be more concerned with, is this the right thing for my client, or even just what is my client going to say? Do you worry about that at all? Or have you ever heard, anything, do designers talk about that kind of effect that a site like Brand New can have?
Yeah, a lot. And especially whenever I do speaking engagements, with AIG chapters or other conferences, and I meet other designers, a lot of them will joke that they are always wondering, they're always concerned about what I might say. They're always thinking about, oh shit, I hope this doesn't make it on Brand New, or if it does, I hope it goes fine. And I think it's flattering and it's nice. And I think what it does is now it gives me the right kind of confidence in that, hey, what I'm saying has an impact on how people are thinking about graphic design or identity design. So I think it just increases that level of stress in a way, but in a positive way, in that I have to make sure that what I'm saying is valuable to as many people as possible and doesn't put down anyone just for the sake of it. But and I've had even designers saying, like, my client specifically said, don't let Armin blast this on brand new, please.
Wow, the feedback loop goes even further than I imagined. I guess it also puts pressure on you to stay really educated on design trends and just design in general, which I'm sure you would want to do anyway. But it does kind of give you that added pressure, because I'm sure you want to make sure that while you are expressing your opinion by definition as a critic, you don't want it to just be your personal taste that's influencing what you write about something versus, I mean, is that true? I guess I'll pose it as a question. Is there a distinction between what you think is good and what you like, or what you think is poor design and just what you don't like, just what's sort of not appealing to you? Or is that just too blurry of a line?
No, I think it's true. And I think for me, it's impossible to not know what's going on, because that's basically what I do every single day. My job is to let other people know what's going on. So, and I serve as a filter. So, as you mentioned, like, what do I choose to post or not? There's for every one project that I post, there's 10 that I didn't. So I'm still looking at all those other 9 that I didn't post, and I'm looking at the project description, I'm looking at the images. So I'm always by default aware of what's going on, and I think that just and I'm also reacting. I'm reading the comments that other people are leaving on what I write. So that helps also frame my thoughts. So, like, hey, so someone disagrees with me, and if they explain why, that gives me a different point of view for the next time that I encounter something similar. So there's a lot of elements at play that help me not be completely biased and not be completely, single-minded about how I write things. But there are certain things, like if someone uses Helvetica, I'm going to go berserk because I hate Helvetica. So no matter, even if it's great, I'm just going to say it's bad because it's Helvetica. But
very polarizing.
Then I'll say, like, okay, I hate Helvetica, but there's this other aspect to it that is good. And a lot of that is informed by allowing other things to influence me, whether it's other comments or other projects or other things being posted on other platforms, whether it's BPNO or the brand identity.
Do you feel like your role as a critic has influenced your role as a designer? So the client work that you do at UnderConsideration, has it influenced it in any other way than just, you're hyper aware of what's going on in the design world, and you're looking at maybe even more beautiful design work than you would were you not running the blog?
Yeah, and especially because I'm always thinking, like, if I posted this on brand new, what would the comments?
Would you review it?
Yeah, how would I review it? Yeah. So there's, I think what it has done, it has made us more, I would say, be more considerate of execution. Because that's what I focus a lot on, like, how are things executed. So even if my concepts are not great, or if my ideas are not the most clever, the execution is going to be unscrutable. Like, that's my goal. And I think that would not have, I've always been pretty good about craft, but I think when that's my main point of focus on my critiques, then I better deliver myself.
Interesting.
I think, again, just like the exposure to different styles, to seeing how people use different typefaces and color combinations. Yeah, like all of that just maybe subconsciously plays a role in my own decisions.
What are, and I know the word trends is kind of a double-edged sword. I don't know if designers even like to talk about trends, but is there anything that you're noticing in the work that you've reviewed over the long arc of your career as a critic? Are there trends that you're seeing, or things that you would maybe even project out into the future, changes in aesthetics or conceptual changes that designers seem to be making more consistently?
I would say the most evident trend that I have seen was the rise of the geometric sans serif for word marks, no matter who, what, or who was the audience. And there was a very specific project, which was Airbnb, that sort of kicked that off. And then Google had that same approach. And then from there, it just exploded. And for the next, so that was 2014 and 15. And that just became kind of like the the default visual language for a lot of designers, a lot of clients, because I think they saw how effective it was for those two clients that they wanted to replicate it, as well as it being a functional decision. Like, yes, that kind of typeface typography works so much better online at small sizes, so it makes sense. But at the same time, it created this really intense sort of avalanche of sameness that became really tiring by by 4 or 5 years later. And even nowadays, whenever you see a geometric sans, like, oh no, please not again. And I think the reaction to that has been happening in the past 1 or 2 years. And I would say that it was Chobani, the Greek yogurt brand, that introduced that bubbly rounded serif. We're like, oh, so now we can do this and people will love it. All right, fine. Let's go in that direction.
Yeah, it seems like there's been a lot more script in the past maybe 5 years. And I wonder if that's part of it as well. Has there been a resurgence of script typeface?
Yeah, a little bit. And I think there's a resurgence both in script and funky typography, just like kind of like uncategorizable typography. And I think it's a reaction, very direct reaction to the geometric sans. Like, all right, we've had it. We need designers saying we've had it. Clients realizing that they need something else to distinguish them from the competition. So it's really nice to see some more emotional, evocative, kind of like metaphorical, if you will, typography that it isn't as straightforward, and it might get those logos might get changed in the next 5 years, but for now they serve as a really nice antidote to everything we've been seeing.
Right. Yeah, I'm going to date myself a little bit here, but it kind of reminds me of like grunge music as a reaction to new wave music from the 80s, which nobody would call Chobani a grunge font, but I do think that the geometric sans, it kind of reminds me of that super clean 80s synthesized sound. And now we have this backlash where people just want to color outside the lines a little bit and do things that are a little funkier. This episode of How Brands Are Built is brought to you by SquadHelp, the world's #1 naming platform. Here's how SquadHelp works. You launch a naming contest to engage hundreds of naming experts. You're guided through an agency-level naming process that goes beyond traditional crowdsourcing. The platform uses AI and includes name validation features such as audience testing, trademark validation, linguistic analysis, and quality scoring. And SquadHelp doesn't just do naming. You can also use their platform for taglines or slogans, as well as logo design. To launch your naming contest today, go to squadhelp.com and start receiving custom name suggestions instantly. SquadHelp, company, brand, and business name ideas by experts. Let's talk about the recent big news from Brand New, that you guys changed to a subscription model. So you're charging $20 a year or $2 a month. So it's not super expensive, but it's certainly a big shift in business model. And it seems like that was prompted partly by the pandemic and the fact that you had to postpone your annual conference, which I know was a big way that you made Brand New profitable. But what else factored into that decision to switch from free to the subscription model?
Yeah, so I think first it was the decision around the survival of UnderConsideration and our family. We needed to find a way to make money, and we were not able to make money, as you mentioned, through the Brand New conference and First Round, which is another series of events that we started in 2018. So there was that element of saying, all right, we need to make money, and we have Brand New as a vehicle that could allow us to change it into a subscription model that would bring that money in. But we asked ourselves a lot, is it the right thing to do? Why now? I mean, why now? It was just, the answer was there, but I think we saw the value that we were providing, and so many people reference Brand New, so many designers use it to show case studies to their clients, so many clients use it as a way to kickstart their own process with other designers. Some clients even find designers through Brand New. So we're providing something of value that has been consistently delivered for the past 14 years. So that gave us a lot of confidence to say, like, hey, it's okay to, like, we had to give ourselves permission to earn money from something that we've been putting a lot of work, a lot of hours for the past 14 years. So that played a big role in realizing, like, hey, we're providing something that people rely on. I mean, if Brand New went away, most designers will continue their careers fine, but I think for a lot of people, it does add a lot in their day-to-day work.
Let's get into the weeds just for a second here on the subscription. If you don't mind sharing, I'm just curious, how, last I saw, I think you've sent out some email updates and some blog posts on this. You were at about 7,500 subscribers. I don't know if you want to share the latest numbers here. We're at the end of October pretty much, but even just kind of how is it going? What reactions are you getting from people?
Yeah, and I'm happy to share. I think we've been so open about the whole thing that it's nice to continue that. We just we're at 10,750.
That's great.
So it's I think that was our initial goal, to reach 10,000 subscribers. And I think we had it by the end of the year. So we've reached that in October, mid-October, which has been great. And there was a big jump from 7,500 to 10,000. It was really quick. It was way faster than we expected.
Word is spreading, I guess.
Yeah, and I think it was also, I think people, after we posted that update of going, we went from 0 to 7,500 without saying anything. Not because we didn't want to, but we were just trying to see. And that was in a span of a month. So it went fast. We didn't know what was going to happen. So when we reached 7,500, it was like, oh, we should let people know, because someone might subscribe, but they don't know how many other people have subscribed. So they're thinking, like, it's just me here in Brand New. Like,
it's important, out there. Because it affects the community, right? That it affects who's commenting. And if you're going to join it, you want to know that there's a lot of other great designers that are going to be looking at these reviews and commenting on them. Yeah.
So I think after we posted that, people were like, oh, okay, so everybody's doing it. We might as well do it. So the reaction has been really positive. There's still, a few tweets here and there. They're like, oh, I can't believe you have to pay now for Brand New, or, this is one way to close down the industry and not allow other people to go in. And there's truth to that, but the same, one thing that we're doing is that we're providing free access to anyone that emails us and says, like, look, I cannot afford it. And, it might seem like $20 might seem like nothing to pay, but for some people right now, it's impossible. So we're like, you let us know. You don't even have to explain yourself. You let me know that you want free access. I'll give it to you.
Yeah. So were you also able to, I know at one point you were looking into ways to let people sort of do what like the New York Times does, where you can read a few articles and then you hit a paywall. Was that just technically difficult to do, or are you still looking into trying to do that?
Yeah, we tried a few different approaches, and it's just technically impossible. It's technically unelegant. And there's with all browsers now having the ability to go incognito, you can bypass any security issues, measures that you put in place. And even the New York Times, if you go incognito, you can read one article at a time, one incognito window at a time.
That's a good tip.
Yeah. You heard it here first. The New York Times. it's if they can't figure it out, I can't figure it out, much less on our limited budget. So so we've abandoned that, and I think what we're going to try to do is figure out a way that articles can be more easily shared one at a time. So somehow, if you want to share an article with your client, you'll, instead of hitting, you'll hit print, but then you'll save it as a PDF, and it will be a nicely formatted PDF that you can share. So that could be one way of doing it. And, we still have an option where we sort of manually give people 1 day access, and people have to request 1 day access, which I think is awkward. So we might make that a default thing that people can just do on their own.
And any other changes in the future? I mean, you've just made this big change, but I'm sure you're always thinking about different things or improvements you could be making to Brand New. So any plans for new content or new types of content on the site?
Yeah, we're starting to think about it and figuring out how can we bring in, a few different voices beyond just me, because I think, 14 years of reading my writing, I mean, I think it's fun for a lot of people, but it'd be nice to somehow bring in other people. But what I found is that whenever other writers were writing reviews on design work, they were late, it was not formatted right. So finding other types of articles that could come into Brand New, that's one option. We would have had the ability for people to create their own favorite archive. So if you see something you like, so you can favorite a project, and then you'll be able to access all your favorite projects. Yeah,
your saved projects. Yeah, that's cool. And you started the podcast recently, so that's obviously a big new endeavor from a content standpoint. Can you talk a little bit about the follow-up?
Yeah. So we started that. So when we first posted, I think it was in June. Yeah, I think June when we realized how horrible the situation was and in the world with the pandemic, and we were not able to get clients. We were like, hey, this is how badly we're doing. We're sad. We're still doing Brand New, and we hope everyone out there is fine and whatever. So it was like a very heartfelt post, just kind of like putting our situation out there for other people to relate. And a lot of people did. And a lot of people said, like, if you had a podcast, I would subscribe to that. And I think that would be one way of generating income. So the follow-up started as a standalone subscription thing before being rolled into the subscription of Brand New. And we didn't get a lot of traction. I think we ran it for, I think it was 2 months, and it was $5 a month or $50 a year. So much more expensive than Brand New.
Right.
And I think people were like, we don't really need to pay that much for a podcast. But it was fine. It was perfect to get it rolling and learn how to do a podcast, learn how to be a host. By the way, you're doing a fabulous job.
But, I will leave that in. I'm not going to edit that out.
And then I think what was really important about the podcast being valuable is that it had to be related to Brand New. It had to be repeatable. On a weekly basis. Now it's bi-weekly because we realized how much work it was. So that's when we thought, we should follow up on recent projects and talk more in depth about each project. And then we were like, should we invite clients? And like, maybe. I mean, we were like, yes, let's invite them. But we sort of expected all of them to say no. Right. And then the first one said yes, the second one wasn't available. And then all of the rest, the clients have said yes. And that has become it's so amazing to talk to people on the client side. And usually it's either the creative director or the brand manager. Sometimes it is the owner. And it's just fascinating to talk to other people that they're the ones on the receiving end of all of our work. And a lot of designers out there just don't know how their potential clients react to design. So it's been great to be able to have those conversations between designers and their direct clients, and how those relationships form, how much they feed off of each other, especially when there's an in-house design team. It's been really fun to do. I get to have, Bryony does some of them, I do most of them. So we get to have really great conversations with people, especially nowadays that sort of doesn't happen.
A novelty, yeah.
Yeah.
And just to be clear, it's now available to brand new subscribers with that $2 a month or $20 a year subscription, or is there another way to access it?
No, it's once you subscribe to brand new, it becomes part of your subscription. So at some point we're like, but people already paid, $50 a year. Like, all right, fine. So all those people, we gave them 3 years of brand new. So we translated that into so that they didn't feel cheated.
That's great. So I want to pivot here a little bit in our remaining few minutes. And it's a bit of a switch in topic here, but it's a little bit of the theme for the podcast this season. So if we could just get philosophical for a moment, given your role as a designer and a critic of design, do you have a point of view on whether or how design and branding can make a positive impact on the world?
Yeah, I do have a very specific point of view. I don't know if it's very novel or not, but I think it's very important to understand that identity design will not save the world. Like our job, what we do, there's nothing in it that will directly save the world.
We're not. That's a good kind of baseline setting, and kind of ego busting for everyone in the industry.
But what's really where we can make a difference is who we make that work for, because we're making that work for people, for companies, for organizations, for products and services that can make a difference in the world, a positive difference in the world. So we empower those clients to be their best, to communicate clearly, to do it engagingly, to do it in a way that is memorable, that sticks in people's minds. So I think that's when we see our industry to be in service of other people who are making a difference in the world, I think that can be really empowering. And, it's important to choose who you work for. And I'm not saying like all your work has to be for nonprofits or for NGOs or for people saving the world. You can do work for profit, for companies, as long as it's not, I don't want to name companies, but
right. But you're just advising people to have their own values and ideals in mind, and not just doing the work to do the work. I mean, some people, I suppose, are in a position where they can't afford to turn work down, and that's one thing. But I like what you're saying, that the power of designers and consultants and agencies is a lot of it is in simply selecting which clients to work for and which ones to kind of let pass. If you just feel like, well, I don't really like what they're doing, or I don't agree with what they stand for, then you have the power to just not help them and let them go on their way.
Yeah, and I think having that sense at the end of the night that you help someone be their best version of themselves. And by someone, I don't mean a person, but like an entity to communicate in the best way possible. And I think that's a really valuable job. It's just not going to save the world.
Yeah. Getting a little more specific, you're a Mexican-American living in a red state in Indiana, where as I mentioned to you, I went to school. The last 4 years, we've seen some pretty ugly rhetoric and policies directed at immigrants, directly at Mexico in particular. Of course, this is most notably coming from the top, coming from the president and his Republican Party. So, along with everything else going on in 2020, the protests for racial justice, the pandemic, the election, has any of this influenced or changed you professionally, your kind of worldview, how you think about what we were just talking about, the role of designers and consultants?
I would say it makes me value my position a lot more and be grateful for what I've been able to achieve. Luckily, in my case, I'm here legally. I'm a citizen now, so I think that it's a reminder that I can make a difference. Like if designers are not saving the world, I'm much less saving the world, critiquing other people.
It's a meta level above design. Yeah.
But I think just, contributing to society, voting, being nice to people. I think that's the main thing in the end. Just like be nice. Like it's so easy to be hurtful. And I think if we tie it back to Brand New, like I think my early reviews, both on Speak Up and Brand New, were more mean, just for the sake of being mean or being catty or trying to do, make people laugh. And nowadays, like, no, like that doesn't really help anyone. It just, especially nowadays when so many people are alone in their apartment or house working without that support from their peers at the office. Like, oh, yeah, our work is getting blasted on Brand New in the comments, but it's okay. Let's hug it out. So I think being conscious of that is really important. And yes, I think for me it's just a matter of keep working hard, which is I think the mentality of most immigrants. Like we come here because we feel that our hard work will pay off.
Right.
A lot of people have to do it illegally, but they know that work ethic will yield better results for them and their family, even if they're risking some of it. So yeah, I think it's just trying to be mindful that me and my wife are lucky to be here and to do something that we enjoy, and just try to pay it forward in different nice ways.
Well, I love that you're doing that, and I like that sentiment of just trying to err on the side of being kind. I think that's some advice that the country could use right now. Yeah. And I hope that this continues to be a country where a lot of people look to it and think, if I just work hard, I can make it there. I hope that American dream sustains in some way, shape, or form. Is there a specific brand or just anything in the branding or design world that you've seen that you want to share with people? You think it's making a positive impact, or you just want people to check it out and support it?
We had a post this week from IBM where they have an inside initiative called Be Equal, and what's great about the logo that they came up with, that they didn't even have to come up with, they just found, it's the B from the IBM Paul Rand version that shows a B instead of the letter B. The bumblebee, yeah. The bumblebee, and inside that bumblebee there's an equal sign, so B Equal is right there. Nice. And it's an diversity and inclusion initiative inside IBM, but that they've made public, and it's just a wonderful design solution, and it's really inclusive, because we talk a lot about brands being inclusive, but how do you really make that happen? And I think this is a perfect example of a really large company doing it right and being very thoughtful with their words and their design choices and how they put it out there for the world and for their employees. I think that's a really good case for other people to if not follow, just to check out and see how they did it. Mm-hmm.
That sounds great. I'll get an image of that up on the notes for this episode. Any book recommendations? I know, by the way, that you've written quite a few, Flaunt, most recently, I think, and a few others. So we'll put links to those. But outside of those, any recommendations for something relevant to branding or design that you think people should pick up?
I would say the last book that I really enjoyed about branding is the one from Michael Johnson of Johnson Banks in the UK. Mm-hmm. And I'm blanking on the name.
Is it the 5.5 Steps?
Yeah. Yes, I thought that was a really nice book that really illustrated literally and metaphorically the identity design process. And what's great is that it comes from someone who has a great track record, who's very eloquent in branding. And I thought that was a really nice book that that covered a lot and has very actionable, not advice, and it's neither actionable nor is it advice, right? It's just like, it's very real. Like that's how it's written, the way identity designers talk and how they relate to the work. So I thought he did a really nice job.
Oh, cool. Great. I've been aware of that book for a while, but haven't checked it out yet. So I'll be sure to do that. And we'll add it to a list of book recommendations from podcast guests if anybody wants to check that out. So last question here, just given your successful career, both as a designer and a critic, any advice for designers or anybody else kind of getting into the branding world or trying to just grow their career?
I think for me, one of my, I don't know if it's a secret, but one of the things that I understand about myself is that I'm not the most talented designer, but I really enjoy looking at graphic design. And it's a little bit like, if you were a chef, you can't just cook without trying other people's food. You can't cook without exploring other cuisines. So my advice is just to look at a lot of brand design, which is not a pitch to go read Brand New.
It's just a happy coincidence.
I hadn't thought about it from that angle, but no, it's really about building your palette for visual identity, for identity design, and how colors work, how typefaces work. And then, it's not about copying anything, but taking bits and pieces from different places, and how do you apply that through your own lens to your clients or to your work. And so I think it's just a lot of it's consuming a lot of identity design and letting it sort of simmer in your subconscious, to keep using cooking metaphors, and then eventually you'll come up with a perfect dish.
Must be getting close to dinner in Bloomington. I want to echo what you just said, because, and I would even expand it to non-designers, people that are just working in the branding world, where they're surrounded by design. So I'll just speak for myself. I don't do any design work. I'm not a designer, but I've loved being able to work next to great designers and immerse myself in identity design through Brand New, but also through my day-to-day work. And I think and hope that through that, I've developed some real perspective and educated opinion on what works and what doesn't, what's quote unquote good and what's not, that is really useful, even though I still can't, open Illustrator and actually create anything for anybody. So great advice and great conversation. Thanks for sticking around a little bit longer than we'd planned on. I just couldn't let you go so quickly because I was really enjoying everything you had to say. Armin Vit, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you so much, Rob. This was fun indeed.
Thanks for listening to How Brands Are Built. To learn more about Armin, visit UnderConsideration.com. From there, you can easily find links to Brand New, design work by Armin and Bryony, as well as books like Flaunt and events like the Brand New Conference. If you visit the write-up of this episode on How Brands Are Built, you'll also find links to Armin's review of that UPS rebrand, which led to Brand New, and images of logos Armin mentioned, like Airbnb and Google with their geometric sans typefaces, Chobani, and Be Equal from IBM. If you liked this episode, please leave a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts. If you haven't done it already, just go do it. It helps ensure more new episodes of How Brands Are Built in the future. How Brands Are Built is a production of Heirloom Agency, LLC. Our logo and original podcast artwork are by Joel Sherlow, with additional design work by Lacey Honda. Web development by Matthias Garrido. Our theme music is by Isha Erskine Project. I'm Rob Meyerson, and I'll talk to you next time.